Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sally Guy. I'm Director of Policy here at the Canadian Association of Social Workers, and I will be moderating today's presentation. So today is actually World AIDS Day, and we are really happy to be marking it by holding this webinar in partnership with Katie to share some of the latest in HIV research. So you will get a proper introduction to Katie, of course, later, but very broadly, Katie is Canada's source for HIV and hepatitis C information. So before I hand over to our speakers, just quickly, all the housekeeping details you need, like how to access the recording, where to download the slides, how to get your certificate of attendance, and lots of other cool resources are all included in the housekeeping widget that popped up when you first logged on. There's also a link to Katie's survey. You can access that by clicking the clipboard icon that's at the bottom. So please take a few minutes near the end of the presentation to fill that out. It will really help them continue to offer education like this. So on to our presenters. We are very fortunate to have Camille Arkell and Melissa Egan with us today from Katie. Camille is a knowledge specialist in biomedical HIV prevention, and Melissa is Regional Health Education Coordinator. So it's clear we're in good hands. And with that, it's my pleasure to pass the mic over to Melissa, who's going to be starting us off.
Thanks, Sally. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Egan. I am, as Sally said, the Regional Health Education Coordinator at Katie. I am one of four, and I, while living in Toronto, work mostly in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. I just want to say thank you very much for the invite to do this. We're pretty excited about it. So to start us off, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about Katie. We are the Canadian source for unbiased, up-to-date information about hepatitis C and HIV. We have a really comprehensive website. It's big and it's interesting. We also have a whole bunch of email subscriptions, so if you'd like to get information about HIV and Hep C into your inbox, you can have a look at our subscriptions page on the website. And we also have confidential inquiry services. Now, this service on the phone is offered Monday to Thursday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We also take messages in return within 24 hours. The line is answered by the four educators who work at Katie. We're all very experienced, and we also answer the emails. So the line and the email question box is for anyone who's looking for more information about HIV or hepatitis C. We tend to get questions from service providers, who are looking for research questions, anything that's come up perhaps in their own workshops or in their own work. We also get questions from people living with HIV or hepatitis C about treatment and support. And really, we also get a whole bunch of questions from the general public. So we encourage you to use this inquiry service and to promote it among your clients. We are able to address kind of questions that run from really complicated to a little bit more simple. We're okay with that. Lastly, I'd like to introduce you to the Katie Ordering Center and really invite you to visit that. We have a large collection of resources, electronic and in print, and we have created a bunch of them, but also we have gained the opportunity to distribute resources that people from around the country have developed for their own communities, and we historically have been able to nationalize these written resources so that this information can be available to everyone. Everything in the Ordering Center is free, and we'll ship it to anywhere in the country. If your clients have concerns about confidentiality, you can assure them that everything is shipped in an unmarked box or an envelope, and we really invite people to order bunches of them so that they can hang out in the offices and they're available for anybody who might need them when they need them. So, to start today, Camille Arkell and I will be speaking to you about how an undetectable viral load can be used as an HIV prevention strategy. Camille is going to start us off with some background information, and that's going to set us up to understand the research that led to U=U. I'm then going to present about how that research and the campaign are affecting people living with HIV. And lastly, I'll go into some ways that you can integrate U=U into your work. And then we'll have a few questions to answer, and you'll have an opportunity to chat with us as well. So, without any more words at all, over to Camille.
Thank you, Melissa. So, I'm here to explain all about U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable, something you might have heard about. There's been a lot of buzz around this lately. And so let's just start by getting everybody on the same page. I'll explain some basics and kind of about the most basic sort of terminology to make sure we're all like right on the same page from the very beginning. So starting with that term, undetectable viral load, what does that mean and why does it matter? So some of you may, as social workers, work with people living with HIV on a regular basis, and many of you may not and might not be familiar with this kind of terminology. So viral load is actually the amount of HIV that's found in the blood of a person living with HIV. And it's measured on a regular basis during routine follow-up care. And the viral load is called undetectable in the blood when the level of virus becomes so low that it can't be measured by the routine test that we use to measure it. So in Canada, this is typically about 40 to 50 copies per milliliter. So anything below that are, the test that we use right now can't detect HIV, so we call it undetectable. Across the world and even across parts of Canada, some tests are a bit better and can find HIV as low as 20 copies per milliliter. Around the world, some tests are a bit worse, and that threshold is a bit higher. But for simplicity, we'll say about 40 copies per milliliter. Anything below that in Canada, we call undetectable. So the way that a person gets their viral load down to undetectable is by taking HIV treatment. So here and throughout my slides, I've referred to it as antiretroviral treatment, or ART, but HIV treatment, same thing. So that is what actually lowers the viral load because it controls HIV's ability to make copies of itself. And so having and maintaining an undetectable viral load by taking treatment is what's good and what's best for the overall health of a person living with HIV. So we've known that for a long time, but also we, really ever since the early days of effective HIV treatment, we've also suspected this concept of treatment as prevention. So the idea that taking treatment to maintain an undetectable viral load not only improves health, but it also helps to prevent onward HIV transmission. And this is through all modes of HIV transmission. We know that the lower the viral load is, the lower the risk of transmission becomes. And people with a very high viral load are the most likely to actually be able to pass HIV on. So from lots and lots of research, which I'm going to go over with you today, we know that HIV-positive people who are on treatment, who maintain an undetectable viral load, do not transmit HIV sexually. So when talking about this risk, we actually say that when this strategy is used consistently and correctly, the risk for sexual HIV transmission is negligible or effectively zero. And this is kind of a new, although we've known, that treatment as prevention is a thing for many years, this kind of bold statement about not being able to transmit HIV sexually when the viral load is undetectable, this is like a very new sort of revolutionary thing that's happening in HIV prevention. And so I've used the word negligible here. We don't really like to use the word negligible because it's a research term and it's not super accessible or understandable to many people. And while statistically you can never prove zero risk, in practical terms, this is what we are seeing in studies. So before we move on to the U equals U campaign, I just want to highlight certain things that are important to know about having an undetectable viral load. So certain things are required in order to rely on this as an HIV prevention strategy. And so we'll get into that a bit later, but by that I mean things like you need to adhere to your medication and you need to be engaged in regular follow-up care. And we will cover some more details on that. It's also important to know that not everyone has equitable access to HIV care and treatment, and this is true globally, but also it's true in Canada. And, if you don't have reliable access to treatment, it's going to be a lot more difficult to become or stay undetectable. And then even once, access to treatment is achieved, not everyone is able to get to an undetectable viral load or maintain it over time, and a lot of that has to do with adherence challenges, but there is research in Canada showing that certain populations are less likely to have an undetectable viral load even once on treatment. So some populations appear to be a bit more likely to struggle with maintaining an undetectable viral load, and this can be for many reasons that impact adherence. So now that I've said that, let's move on to talking about this great campaign, U equals U. It stands for Undetectable equals Untransmittable. It's a campaign that was developed by a group of people living with HIV, and it's been promoted all over the world by this group and many advocates and researchers. So U equals U is kind of like this catchy slogan. It's a way to like get the message heard and to simply convey this message to people. But there is a more sort of nuanced message behind it. So basically, it's a simple message intended to do a couple of things. So first, the point is to increase awareness about the prevention benefits of treatment, because many people living with HIV don't actually know this about themselves, about the fact that they can't transmit HIV if they maintain an undetectable viral load. And then second, it's a great way to reduce stigma, not only, the stigma that people might feel internally about themselves and their worth as a person living with HIV, able to, pass this disease on to others, but also, it has the potential to reduce stigma among healthcare providers and among HIV-negative people who might fear getting HIV. And I just want to tell you a little story about Bruce Richmond, who is the person who started this campaign, and kind of why he started this campaign. So he is a gay man living in New York City. He had a regular partner he was having sex with. This was in 2012. One time they were having sex and the condom broke. And this person knew he was HIV positive and had a bit of a freak out, because I guess that had never happened to them before, nor had it happened to Bruce, and so he was quite worried. He went to his doctor and explained to him what had happened, and what can I do, like how can I make sure that this person doesn't get HIV? And his doctor was like, oh, don't worry about it, you're undetectable, you can't transmit HIV. And he was like, what do you mean? How come I've never heard this before? And so he realized that, his doctor had kind of deemed him as a, quote, responsible patient. He's a well-educated, middle-class, white, gay guy, and, his doctor felt like he could handle, knowing this information. But essentially, Bruce's opinion is that that's not ethical, and that everyone has a right to know this information. So for him, who started this campaign, this is actually very much a rights-based campaign that is, for him, first and foremost, about improving the lives of people living with HIV, with, prevention and the goal of ending the epidemic as a secondary goal. So, as I said, U equals U, catchy campaign slogan. There is kind of a more nuanced statement that is on their website. I think we've included a link to this website in the resources section of this webinar. But basically it explains, kind of some of the things that are required in order to make this strategy work. So, it can take as long as 6 months for the viral load to become undetectable. Excellent adherence to treatment is required, and ongoing regular monitoring of the viral load is important. And so here they've also used the word negligible and defined it as basically, it means insignificant risk, like don't worry about it. It's going to happen. So a bit more context history on the U=U campaign and this information. So in 2008, almost 10 years ago, we had something called the Swiss Statement, and that was, in Switzerland, a group of doctors and HIV experts they released a statement basically for clinicians in Switzerland who were working with people living with HIV. They wanted to give them this guidance based on the available research at the time, as well as all of their combined clinical experience. And essentially this statement said what U=U is saying now. 10 years ago, they said, a person living with HIV who is on treatment and maintains a suppressed viral load can't transmit HIV. So back in 2008, when this came out, many people felt it was really too early to confidently say that, and that there was not enough research to support it. So over the past decade, there's been much more research that's been conducted, much more rigorous and high-quality research, which I'm going to go through with you in a bit of detail. And at this point, researchers from all the major studies have endorsed U=U, and even actually the Canadian government today released a statement supporting U=U, and in their statement they said, what I've been saying so far in this webinar: when a person living with HIV is on ART, takes their medications consistently as prescribed, and maintains a confirmed suppressed viral load, there is effectively no risk of their passing the infection on to their sexual partners. So U=U, I think I've already said, but let me stress this again, this is about sexual transmission. So now on to the research. There are a few major studies that released results in the summer of 2016. We had two really big studies release their final results that really conclusively showed U=U. So let me give you a bit of a rundown of what they found. So the first study I want to tell you about is called HPTN 052. And so the purpose of this study was to understand how much the use of HIV treatment can reduce the risk of HIV transmission. So this study took place mostly in, I think, African countries. They enrolled over 1,700 couples. These were heterosexual, serodiscordant couples, meaning one of the people in the partnership was HIV positive and one was HIV negative, and none of them had started treatment at this point. This was back in 2007, I think, they started enrollment. And so half of these couples, they randomized, so this is an RCT, a randomized control trial. They said, half of you, we're going to give you treatment right away, get you on treatment. The other half, we will delay treatment. They would only be eligible for treatment if they got sick enough, basically. So we had a study where half of the people were on treatment and half were not, and they looked at how many couples passed HIV how many HIV positive people in those partnerships passed HIV to their HIV negative partner. The preliminary results showed that if you were on treatment, you had a 96% lower risk of passing HIV to your partner. And so that doesn't mean that there was a 4% risk of transmitting HIV. It means, whatever the risk was among people not on treatment, For people on treatment, it was 96% lower, so dramatically reduced. This was really big news. This was released in 2011. And so then what they did was they said, okay, everybody in this study should be on treatment. They offer treatment to everybody, and then they continued to follow people for another 4 years. The final results were released last summer, as I mentioned, and so by the end, even though it didn't show 100% reduction in risk for people on treatment, it did show that 100% of people with an undetectable viral load did not transmit HIV. So in total, there were 8 transmissions that occurred between partners while the HIV-positive person was on treatment, but none of these happened when the viral load was undetectable. And as you recall, there were a lot of people in this study, over 1,700 couples. So why did these transmissions happen? So I'm just going to walk you through why, because I think that understanding why these happen can help to illustrate how to use this properly as a prevention strategy. So 4 HIV transmissions happened during the first 3 months of taking treatment. So what actually happened was that, these people started treatment with likely very high viral loads, and they passed on HIV before their viral load had dropped down to undetectable levels. And I've just included this chart here to show you, in this study, the proportion of people who were virally suppressed at different time points. So as you can see, at 3 months, 3 quarters of people in the study were virally suppressed. So, quite a number of people were able to have an undetectable viral load after 3 months, but still not everyone. And then even after a year, you can see the vast majority at that point have an undetectable viral load, but still not everyone. And so this helps us to see that, it can take time to get to undetectable, and that it's not enough to just be on treatment without being certain that the viral load actually is undetectable. And so the other 4 HIV transmissions occurred to what we call treatment failure or viral rebound. And so that means that the viral load maybe was undetectable, but it bounced back up to detectable levels. And we call this treatment failure, but really it typically most commonly happens because of low adherence to treatment. That's the most common reason. And so again, this shows us that we need to be certain the viral load is undetectable, and also that we need to be monitoring the viral load regularly. However, this really shouldn't be a problem. We don't need to be concerned that all of a sudden treatment's going to stop working as long as a person's adherence is really consistent. So this also tells us about how important it is to adhere to the HIV treatment. Next big study is called the partner study. And so the purpose of the partner study was to look at the risk of HIV transmission when no condoms were used and when the viral load was undetectable. So this study also enrolled serodiscordant couples, but this time there were heterosexual couples as well as same-sex male couples. So for this, we can look at vaginal sex as well as anal sex and confirm that U equals U applies to, all kinds of sex. So everyone in this study was already on treatment, and everyone in this study reported that they weren't using condoms consistently. It was not a randomized study like HPTN 052. And the preliminary results from a few years ago reported early on that there were no HIV infections when the viral load was undetectable, despite having sex without condoms and over 44,000 times. Again, final results released in the summer of 2016. So we see 58,000 acts of condomless vaginal and anal sex and still no HIV transmission. So this now, after these two studies, we had a significant amount of evidence. This is when the U equals U campaign launched, because the evidence was kind of undisputable at this point. There's also another study you might have heard of that I will mention called Opposites Attract. It's ongoing, and in this study they only enrolled gay male couples. At this point, the most recent results, almost 17,000 acts of condomless anal sex, no HIV transmission. So we are seeing a theme. So just to sort of pull it all together, give you some take-home messages from the research, we know that no HIV transmissions are happening when the viral load is undetectable while the HIV-positive partner is on ART and engaged in care. And as I said, this research is only looking at sexual transmission. So from the partner study, we know that this strategy is effective regardless of whether condoms are used. However, if you're going to be having sex without condoms, there is a risk for other sexually transmitted infections. We know that in the context of untreated HIV, having an STI can actually increase a person's risk of getting or passing HIV. However, from this study, from both of these studies, all three of these studies, the evidence suggests that having an STI doesn't impact the risk of transmission, so it doesn't increase the risk of transmission in the context of an undetectable viral load. All three of these studies actually had fairly high rates of STIs, and it didn't increase the risk of transmission among people who had STIs, because none happened, right? So we know that HIV transmission can occur while on treatment if the viral load becomes detectable. So really this is about being undetectable and maintaining that over time. And here's an interesting tidbit, which I hadn't mentioned yet, but sex partners from outside the relationship actually accounted for a fairly significant number of HIV infections. So although we didn't see HIV infections happening but among the partners that were enrolled in the study, some people got HIV and it just wasn't, they weren't able to genetically link it to their partner. So the thought is that they contracted HIV from a sex partner outside of that relationship. So it's important to know that, while using this strategy is great, you need to be, if you have multiple sex partners, you need to be thinking about your HIV prevention strategies with all of them. And so lastly, before I pass it off to Melissa, I just want to acknowledge that there are certainly other modes of HIV transmission. It is not only passed through sex. So HIV can also be transmitted through sharing used needles and other injection equipment. And so the available research suggests that the risk of transmitting HIV is also dramatically reduced among people who inject drugs who do share needles, but there isn't enough evidence to confirm that the risk is negligible or approaching zero. Similarly, for perinatal transmission, which is a baby being born HIV positive, we know that when HIV treatment is taken by HIV positive people, especially if it's taken throughout their entire pregnancy and they maintain an undetectable viral load throughout pregnancy and delivery, the rates of transmission are exceedingly low, like very, very close to zero actually for that mode of transmission. However, breastfeeding, so after a baby is born to an HIV positive person, breastfeeding can also introduce a risk of HIV transmission because breast milk actually contains HIV, and there is some evidence to suggest that breast milk may contain HIV even when the viral load in the blood is undetectable. And so for these other modes of transmission, it's possible we'll get there one day, but at this point we don't have the same quality of evidence to say that U equals U for these modes.
Okay. Thanks, Camille. That was great. I hope that you enjoyed that particular half of the webinar. And now it's my turn, and I'm going to really focus on U equals U and people who are living with HIV. So we're going to start off doing that by talking a little bit about HIV-related stigma and really wanting to think about how U equals U might affect HIV-related stigma and really what service providers can do to mitigate that stigma. When working with people with HIV, it's important to consider ways that stigma manifests in relation to HIV. People stigmatize people living with HIV when they don't want to touch people or be close to them, they don't want to share dishes, or they don't want to hug them. They might even stop spending time with somebody or kind of isolate them within their community or even ask them to leave a community. Sometimes people with HIV are judged as being immoral or irresponsible, that they deserve to get this particular infection because of something they do or something that they did. HIV is highly, highly stigmatized, and when that's the culture in which you live or when you've internalized that stigma, it really can result in people hesitating to access services. It could be out of fear of gossip or disclosure, people talking about you and you don't really know who's saying what and you don't want anybody to know your business. What we know about stigma is that when somebody experiences internalized stigma, it can also lower their medication adherence, and this is relevant to U equals U because of all the things that Camille just walked us through. There can also be a reluctance to access health care and even other social supports. So part of beating stigma is providing people with all of the available information about their health, and this piece is really important health information for them to know because of that duality that it can result in, a greater understanding and acceptance of HIV within a community, but also a greater understanding and acceptance of the person themselves. We really need to fight internalized stigma in a really big way. And some people have given us a sense of what it can be like to live with HIV and how U equals U has affected them. This quote is from Christian Hui, who is an HIV activist, who says, as an activist and a person living with HIV who's privileged to have access to life-saving treatments and good health care, U equals U is something I embrace and celebrate. U equals U has presented people with HIV with even more reason to demand universal access to treatment and health care. So we see that even though this is an awareness-building campaign for the general public globally, it can also actually galvanize and empower people to not only advocate for themselves, to not only have greater confidence in themselves, but also begin to advocate for other people, for the community. That kind of social movement is really, really special. This is another quote that is quite moving. Tom tells us that he spent 25 years stigmatizing myself while trying to provide a positive front in my work with people living with HIV. I feel somewhat hypocritical because while fighting against stigma and discrimination, I perceived HIV as making me damaged goods, dirty, and less than. I lived in fear of transmitting HIV and built walls to keep others out. U equals U has impacted me to my very soul. I am now aware that I'm much more than a virus. I can look forward to more meaningful relationships with others and opening my heart. This quote gives us a real sense of how deeply stigma can impact people and also how the campaign is affecting people's views of themselves, of HIV, and of the community. The way that you can continue this is by speaking to your clients about U equals U and continuing to confront HIV stigma where you see it. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to talk about U equals U? Here we go. We'll give you a few tips. Remembering that U equals U is a prevention campaign is important. The messaging is short and simple, so it doesn't capture all the nuances of how to use it as an HIV prevention strategy. So this is where you come in. Some of the key points to communicate to clients are that the strategy is dependent on viral loads staying undetectable over time. So that means good engagement in healthcare. Adherence to medication is necessary, and that's tough. It can change over time as well. While you're engaged in care in a particular city or town, it might be easier than when you move to a new city and you don't really know where to go with your doctor and all of that. So those kinds of social shifts and changes have a big impact on medication adherence, which will then have an impact on viral load. So these are things and nuances that are important to remember. As I said, ongoing engagement in regular care and viral load testing are very important. And remembering that it can take 3 to 6 months for people to get an undetectable viral load after they start treatment. So this isn't an instant sort of thing. It's something that needs to be worked on and kind of taken a little bit slow. And that viral load should be undetectable for 6 months before relying on this strategy. So really, from diagnosis and starting treatment, we're looking at, almost a year before U equals U can be a reliable strategy. So this is where we still need to talk about condoms and other HIV prevention strategies. If your client has questions that you can't answer, send them to Katie. Get them to call us, but also have them speak to their primary care provider, right? This is where a lot of that information can come. When used correctly, HIV treatment does reduce the risk of HIV transmission through both anal and vaginal sex. So when an undetectable viral load is maintained, the risk of sexual transmission is negligible or effectively zero. This means that now, as service providers, as people working in HIV, as people who are working with people with HIV, we can confidently say that a person taking antiretroviral treatment with an ongoing undetectable viral load who is engaged in care will not transmit HIV to their sexual partners. I've been working in HIV for nearly 15 years. This is amazing to me. It's still exciting a year later. All right, so how do we support our clients to do this? Well, supporting treatment uptake, supporting adherence. So remembering that the decision to take treatment is a real personal choice, and there are inequitable access to care and treatment around the country. So some people who perhaps live in Toronto have a really different kind of access to HIV treatment than somebody who's living in northern Quebec. Not everyone can maintain an undetectable viral load, and that just really is about, for some people, social situations. For other people, biology and chemistry. Really, we don't always have the answers, so this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And adherence is about keeping HIV-positive people healthy, and that's affected by life circumstances. As I said earlier, it might be moving, it could be a breakup, it could be a death in the family. All kinds of things impact our ability to take our day-to-day medications and that sort of thing. So keeping that in mind and as part of your messaging is an important piece to make this work. We can also support clients by remembering that people need accurate and comprehensive information about U equals U and comprehensive health counseling, which includes sexual health counseling. What I'd like to ask you is really, do you know if you're a good source for information? Are you familiar with a couple of websites or resources that you can quickly refer people to? It's a good idea to be prepared for some of the questions that might come up about this. And remember, you can use Katie. We are always around. Pass our phone number along and our email address if you're really having some struggles with answering client questions. What I'd like to leave you with is remember that this is personal. Okay, this is about people's health information. And U equals U isn't new information. As Camille said, really, we've been discussing this since 2008. What's new is actually telling people and promoting it globally, having it not stay in the hands of healthcare providers and researchers, but getting it out into the public and with people who are living with HIV. U equals U calls for a big shift in attitude, and that is going to take some time, all right? So there may be a little bit of backlash here and there. We at Katie are quite comfortable talking around that and talking about that. So again, you can give us a call and maybe we can give you some tips on what you might be able to say. And remembering that, unfortunately, U equals U does not affect the criminalization of HIV non-disclosure. This may eventually change and be impacted by the evidence we have about viral load undetectability, but the law hasn't yet caught up with the science. So we still need to inform clients that they are legally required to disclose their HIV status to their sexual partners. The personal health and well-being of people who are living with HIV still needs to be a priority when we're caring for them. So this is a personal thing, it's a global message, it's a movement, and we really need to keep people with HIV and their health at the center of what we're doing. All right, that's everything from us. It looks like we've got a whole bunch of time to answer some of your questions. So I'm going to pass it over to Sally, who's going to try and kind of facilitate some of that, but I look forward to speaking with you.
Well, Camille, Melissa, thank you so much for that. I know I learned a lot of new information, and I'm going to actually just jump right into the questions. I am going to, if we get a bunch, I will try my best to sort of combine them into two, but thanks for understanding if we can't get to yours just because of the time. So the first one is, someone asks, I learned about U equals U a while ago, and I was interested in doing a presentation on it, but my colleagues were concerned that I was effectively saying it was okay not to use condoms. So how can I respond to that?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a concern that we've heard raised by many people. One thing we know is that, like, a lot of people are just not using condoms. You know, a lot of people, for many different reasons, like, find them uncomfortable or inconvenient or difficult to access or difficult to negotiate. And so we know for a fact that a lot of people are not using condoms already. And so when it comes to HIV prevention, we think, you know, this is not about telling people don't use condoms, but it's about telling people that there are more options out there. So there are now several highly effective ways to prevent HIV transmission. So we need to provide comprehensive information about these strategies so that should they choose not to use condoms, they know that there are other options for them. So condoms are one way to prevent HIV, one great way to prevent HIV for sure, but other really good ways include this strategy, so using treatment to maintain an undetectable viral load for HIV-positive people. And another highly effective strategy that we talk a ton about at Katie is the use of PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis, by HIV-negative people, which is essentially HIV-negative people who are taking HIV treatment to prevent HIV. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's a super, very highly effective, proven strategy. And so, you know, we believe that it's up to us to provide clients with all the information available so that they can make the best decision for themselves.
Right, yeah. The next one I'm going to go to is you actually just talked about, but I think it's really timely too. And it links up with some of the advocacy that CSW does. And so Katie and CSW are both signatories to the recent community consensus statement on reforming HIV criminalization. This is really close to home for so many people. And you did note that U equals U, or this research, has not so far impacted laws about HIV non-disclosure. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, you guys are experts on this, could you comment on why, you know, advocacy and movement around this is so important?
Ooh, wow. It's a big question, and it's difficult really to address kind of all of the intricacies of the law. I really recommend that if folks want to learn a little bit more about it, we do have a blog post about the criminalization of HIV non-disclosure. So if you just go to blog.katie.ca, it was quite recent, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. But really, advancing U equals U as part of broader advocacy efforts, really, we need to think about it a little bit more, because individuals who are already facing discrimination and marginalization might actually face other unique barriers to attaining undetectable status. This kind of work is important because, as I said earlier, we have scientific evidence that the law hasn't caught up to yet. And because of that, we need to keep kind of agitating and talking and making sure that as many people as possible know about the science, so that we can actually get the law to shift and change. This morning, Ontario released a statement saying that they weren't going to be prosecuting people about this particular issue until there was a review. I briefly read a Toronto Star article, so please have a look at that yourselves as well, because this is about making sure that we can kind of move what we know about research into the legal realm.
And I think it's also important to keep in mind that, you know, with the law, we shouldn't be moving towards like, oh, you equals you, so if you're undetectable, you shouldn't be criminalized, but if you're detectable, it's fair game. We should really continue in our advocacy to get out the message that actually this law is bad for everyone, and it is not an effective public health tool to be sending people to jail for not disclosing their HIV status.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely complex. And I mean, I think things like today, like just educating social workers or other populations just about this is sort of part of that advocacy, I guess. I have more questions, and some of them are sort of more granular, I would say. And some of them I think about are fear of how this message could be used. So the next one is, do you think that rates of STIs are going to go up, or is there any proof that they're going up as this message is becoming more mainstream?
Yeah, like it's definitely possible that STI rates will be high among people who are using this strategy if they decide not to use condoms. And all of the studies that I talked about, as I mentioned, had fairly high rates of STIs. In Canada, we're also seeing huge increases in STIs, syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and this is like partly because people are not using condoms, but also people who are having condomless sex are not getting routinely tested for STIs. So what I will say is that, you know, an important part of this particular strategy, as I mentioned, is regular medical follow-up, which should include STI testing for people who are having condomless sex, and PrEP, which I also just mentioned. PrEP is something that, you know, we're promoting heavily, and we're hoping to see a lot more access to and people taking up this strategy. And this also includes regular follow-up and STI testing. So what we're seeing is with these new HIV prevention strategies that we're promoting, we're also heavily promoting, you know, engagement in care and regular STI testing and sexual health checkups, with the idea that when more people who are having condomless sex, so who are at higher risk for passing or getting HIV, so when more of those people are engaged in regular sexual health care, STIs can ultimately be diagnosed and treated earlier, making them less likely to be passed on. And so we believe that this sort of test and treat strategy and the fact that our HIV prevention strategies are becoming more comprehensive and really emphasizing that comprehensive sexual health care, that this can help to address some of the STI epidemics that we're seeing already.
Right, right. The next question I think actually fits well with that in terms of prevention and like tailoring treatment to different people and comprehensive treatment. You talked a bit earlier in the presentation about different populations and their status, I guess. And so the next question is there a biological reason for why different groups of people may be less likely to have an undetectable viral load after starting treatment?
So we think that the answer is no. And research, so I actually recently wrote an article about this. I think I included it in the resources for this webinar. It's about the likelihood of getting to undetectable once on treatment among different populations in Canada. And what I found is that there is research that shows that different communities and populations might be less likely to have an undetectable viral load even after starting treatment. And these include people who use drugs, women, Indigenous people, and youth. However, the reasons are not biological, but largely they have to do with adherence. And so we know there are many reasons for why people may have trouble adhering to their HIV medications, including the social determinants of health, so homelessness and housing issues and food insecurity, but also, people experience barriers to accessing routine health care, to regularly filling their prescriptions or paying for their prescriptions. So there's a ton of reasons for why, certain more marginalized populations are struggling a bit more than statistically than others to actually maintain that undetectable viral load.
Right. This next one is sort of a more technical one, I think, and it's asking, so what about the HIV that's found in semen, vaginal, or rectal fluid? So is that considered undetectable too?
Yeah, so the research has found that when HIV treatment leads to an undetectable viral load in the blood, it also definitely reduces the viral load everywhere in all the bodily fluids, and normally leads to an undetectable viral load in semen, vaginal, and rectal fluids. And so occasionally, people with an undetectable viral load in the blood have been found to have detectable HIV in, for example, their semen, but this hasn't been found to increase transmission risk. And we know studies actually show also that the HIV in this, the presence of HIV in these fluids is most common soon after starting HIV treatment, and typically we don't see any detectable viral load in those other bodily fluids after about a year or more of being on treatment with an undetectable viral load.
Okay, interesting. That leads well actually into the next one, which is, can you just explain a little bit more, I guess, about breastfeeding and HIV transmission?
Yeah. So I mentioned breastfeeding just very briefly at the end of my portion there, and the key message, I guess, is that we aren't currently saying U equals U about breastfeeding. Breastfeeding it's kind of a hot topic right now. It's controversial. A lot of people are asking, oh, U equals U, that's great, can I breastfeed? And that's because I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but in Canada, people who are living with HIV are recommended to not breastfeed. It's recommended that they formula feed, even though the rest of the population, exclusive breastfeeding is recommended for 6 months or whatever, and there's a discrepancy there, and it can be frustrating or confusing for people living with HIV. So it definitely is a question that we get a lot. There's a few things I can say about it. For one thing, there have been in studies a few documented cases of HIV transmission happening through breastfeeding, even when the mother had an undetectable viral load in her blood. And it appears that breast milk then might be able to contain HIV, even when the blood viral load is undetectable. And this is because breast milk is kind of it's a really interesting fluid. It's full of immune cells. The purpose is to provide immunity and immune support to that new developing infant, and so it's a really highly, there's a lot of possibility for HIV to sort of be active and replicate in that environment as well. It's a different mode of transmission, so infants who are breastfeeding are getting this liquid that might have HIV in it, 6-10 times a day, like just really ingesting a lot of that fluid. So it's really complicated, and at this point, there is ongoing research, and people are talking about it a lot, but we can't say U equals U, unfortunately, at this point, though the risk is quite low.
Right, no, it is so complex, and it is important to talk about all these different distinctions. So I think we probably have time for one more question, and I think it's a good kind of like wrap-up, cap-off question, like the takeaway, I guess, and it's, so can I really tell people that the risk of HIV transmission with an undetectable viral load is 0?
Yeah, so what we say is, in real-world terms, yes, the risk is in fact 0. In theoretical terms, so in like statistics lingo, the risk is a tiny fraction close to 0. So it's impossible to ever say that a risk is 0 statistically. But we feel that it's not helpful to focus on a theoretical risk. And we do think that, through ongoing research, that number will keep getting closer and closer to 0. But really, practically speaking, as I've showed through the research, there aren't any documented cases of HIV transmission with an undetectable viral load, and all of the researchers agree that we can confidently say that a person living with HIV on treatment with an undetectable viral load is not going to transmit HIV to their sexual partners.
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, that is bringing us around the end of our time. You'll see right now on your screen that Camille and Melissa's emails are both up there right now. I've also had a few questions asking about where to find further information. I'm sure, Camille and Melissa, that would be happy to have you reach out to them for further information, or check out that resources box widget on the left hand of your screen, where that article that was referenced is there in PDF form. But I do think that the Katie website probably has tons more information if you're looking for more information. I do have to say, too, right now that just click on that pencil icon, that clipboard icon at the bottom of your screen, and do take a couple minutes to fill out Katie's survey. It will really help them continue to provide good continuing education for us like this. It'll only take 2 or 3 minutes. And I have to say another huge thanks to Camille and Melissa for lending their expertise to us today on World AIDS Day. And thanks to everyone so much for their questions. And take care until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.